Good evening, everybody. We have reached the end of free agency frenzy week. 5 straight days of almost all day streaming, trying to capture all of the exciting happenings of NFL free agency frenzy. And there was a lot of stuff that went on across the league, of course. There was a lot of stuff that happened pretty much every day in the streams. These last 2 days, maybe a little bit less than the first three, but there was constant movement, constant action, and we captured most of it live on stream. And the Seahawks, regardless of how you personally feel about their moves, were more active in free agency than they've been in a very long time, I think is fair to say. So it was a fruitful week of streaming. We had a lot of fun. We talked about all kinds of different things. We talked about other teams. We talked about other sports. We talked about video games. We talked about all kinds of stuff. We had a ton of fun, and I'm happy I did it. I will be doing it again next year, almost certainly. We are going to definitely look to find more opportunities to do things like this where I'm just able to sit here and stream for long periods of time. Um, the attendance was great throughout, pretty much. Obviously, that first day was the really active day because there was so much excitement around what was going on in free agency on that first day because all the big stuff was about to come off the board. But overall, it was a great week of streaming. People were very supportive. And like I said, I'm going to definitely look to do this again in the future for future years. And I would consider this to be one of the high points, one of the highlights of running this channel, this channel over year after year after year. The free agency frenzy week. Definitely going to continue to keep it up going on. So today, to sum up what happened today in the NFL, it was slower. There weren't any huge moves, really. Nothing massively earth-shattering overall, I don't think. A lot of I didn't see any of my top free agents go off the board today. There were some guys who were on my board who went off, guys like Dean Lowry, guys like Drew Tranquill, but the top guys just kind of they're still out there. And at this point, the fact that they still haven't signed makes you wonder: are they just going to wait till after the draft to see, okay, who needs me, who's going to give me the most money, where can I actually get playing time? Like, a guy like a Bobby Wagner, who we know wants to win. I know everyone's asking about Bobby, and I'll just use him as an example. He wants to win. Bobby Wagner wants to win. So he doesn't want to get screwed like he did last year, going to a team that he thought was going to win and ended up being one of the worst teams in the league. So don't be surprised if some of these remaining guys do not sign until after the draft. Now, as for what the Seahawks did today, it was really only one move, but it was a pretty big one. It happened earlier today. We signed safety Julian Love from the New York Giants to a 2-year, $12 million deal. That is a lot less than I thought he was going to get. Most sites had him getting about 8 to 8.5 million a year. Eight. I think Spotrac had like 5 years, 8 million. PFF had 3 years, 8.5 million, something like that. So we got him at a heavy discount from expectations, which is great. And this guy, he does it all. He's a free safety. He's a strong safety. He's a nickel corner. In college, I think he played outside corner. So he gives you a lot of flexibility. I think this first year you are looking at him playing nickel corner for us mostly. And then next year, the year after, 2024, maybe he moves to safety when we move off of guys like Adams and Diggs, which I do think is going to happen. So he's going to wear a lot of different hats for this defense, a lot of different hats for this team. I think it's a nice pickup here. I'm really happy about it. I hope that we can keep Ryan Neal as well, because those two guys can be the future at safety. Two guys who are going to be reasonably priced and effective. We can move past this era of ridiculously overpaying for our safeties. And yeah, I think that signing is pretty great. I think that it's been a pretty fruitful free agency period. The things that you could be critical of are present, of course, the lack of long-term deals, the lack of void years to stretch out the cap hits. That's not great. I don't really love that. That's why we are sitting here right now with, according to most sources, a rather limited amount of money. But at the end of the day, it was still the best free agency we've had in a long time in terms of just volume. Draymond Jones has the biggest outside free agent contract the Seahawks have ever, ever handed out, to my knowledge. The honestly, the Julian Love contract, while it's not long term and it's not huge, it is significant. This is not some, depth signing of a backup safety who never really did anything where he's been before. There's a lot to love about this free agency, I think. The Evan Brown contract was insanely good value. He signed a contract that is not radically different from the contract that Kyle Fuller got last year. And who is Kyle Fuller? A bad backup. So when you look at it like that, it's been a pretty phenomenal free agency period for the Seahawks, I think. Today, obviously, there was the only one big move, but it was a pretty big one, I think. That guy is going to play a very significant role with this team for the duration of his contract, I believe. So now the question is, where does the team stand? Because the first week of free agency, look, there are plenty of guys who are still available. There are plenty of good guys who you could still pick up. You can still get Bobby Wagner. You can still get Matt Ioannidis. You can still get Greg Gaines, A'Shawn Robinson. Odell Beckham Jr. is still out there. There are guys. Don't get me wrong. There are still plenty of guys out there. Frank Clark. Even a guy like Derek Neonde from Kansas City. Pretty good. Denzel Perryman. There are still ways to improve all 32 teams out there. And the Seahawks are no exception. But at this point, we have to have a pretty good idea of how the team is going to look going into the draft. The good news is we have more draft capital than typical. We have extra draft capital compared to previous years. So we can address more in the draft than average. So I'm not too concerned about having problems with the roster going into the draft because we have extra picks. However, the question is, how pigeonholed are we going to be into doing certain things? How forced are we going to be to take like a linebacker? I'm going to make a video about this probably tomorrow morning, but basically the way I see it, there are still some areas on this team that we are kind of pigeonholed into going after in the draft. And that's okay. You just have to actually make sure you follow through. You have to make sure you actually draft at those positions, but that's not necessarily a super desirable place to be. That's not exactly the place you want to be mentally going into the draft, thinking we have to take guys at these positions or else. But as always, there are going to be some good guys who are free agents even after the draft. So there's always going to be opportunities to shape your roster even better. And overall, I'd say this free agency was a success, especially if you consider the hypothetical handicap that a team that is going to be sold soon may have, if you buy into that. If you accept that that is probably the case with this Seahawks team right now, which I think it's hard to deny that this team is looking to be sold soon. I mean, Jody Allen basically admitted it, and there may not be as much flexibility as there is typically financially because of that. And if that's the case, then we're doing the best that we can. Yeah, so it was a great week. I had a pretty good day. I still have a lot of guys in free agency that I would still like, and as those guys come off the board, if they go to the Seahawks especially, I'll make videos about it. But that is the end of the week of live streaming. It was a really great week overall, man. It was a really great week overall. And I'm excited to see where this team goes. I'm pretty happy with what they did. And hopefully we can do this again next year. We'll be doing this again in the draft. See you guys then. Go Hawks.